I was pitching a project worth millions when my bedroom door flew open. On screen, the CEO and our biggest client were watching. Behind me, my stepmother hissed, demanding cash while reminding me I lived under her roof. I could not mute my mic. My world was live streaming, but she had no idea who else was watching. That video was about to destroy the life she had built on my back. My name is Riley Hartman, and at that specific moment, I was existing in two completely different realities. In one reality, I was a 32-year-old project manager at Northline Dynamics, sitting straight-backed in a blazer I had steam-pressed 10 minutes prior, commanding the attention of my CEO and a high-profile hospital administration team from New York. In this reality, I was confident, articulate, and mere inches away from a promotion that would finally give me the salary bump I needed to escape the suffocating gravity of my hometown. In the second reality, the true one, I was sitting on a folding metal chair in the unfinished basement of my father's house in Riverton, Pennsylvania. The air down here always smelled faintly of damp concrete and old insulation. Just outside the carefully cropped frame of my webcam, piles of my father's hoarded car parts and boxes of holiday decorations were stacked precariously high. I had spent 40 minutes adjusting a cheap ring light to wash out the shadows under my eyes and arranging a portable screen behind me so that the cracks in the cinder block walls were hidden. To the people on the screen, I was in a sleek, modern home office. To the woman upstairs, I was an invisible burden occupying space that could be better used for storage. "As you can see from the projection on slide 4, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the cold draft nipping at my ankles. The integration of our software will reduce patient intake time by roughly 40% within the first quarter. This isn't just about speed, it is about accuracy." I clicked to the next slide. My hand was trembling slightly, but I kept it below the desk level. On the screen, Marcus, the CEO of Northline, nodded approvingly. He was a man who appreciated efficiency above all else. Next to his video feed was the client, Mr. Vance, a man who controlled a budget of $15 million and had not smiled once in the last hour. If I nailed this, I was set. I just needed 10 more minutes. Just 10 minutes of silence. Then I heard it. It started as a heavy thud directly above my head. Dust motes danced in the beam of my ring light as the ceiling joists vibrated. My stomach tightened into a knot. That was the kitchen floor. Someone was walking with purpose, and in this house, heavy footsteps never meant anything good. I prayed it was just my father looking for his blood pressure medication, but the cadence was wrong. It was too sharp, too aggressive. The clicking of hard heels on laminate flooring echoed down the ventilation duct like a countdown. I cleared my throat, trying to cover the sound of the basement door at the top of the stairs being wrenched open. "The security protocols we have implemented are top tier," I continued, speaking a little louder, pitching my voice to mask the encroaching chaos. "We use two-factor authentication for all staff entries, ensuring that patient data remains—" "Riley!" The name tore through the air, shrill and demanding. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze for a fraction of a second, my eyes darting to the mute button. But I was in the middle of a sentence. If I muted now, it would look like a technical failure. I had to power through. I had to pretend the noise was coming from a neighbor, or perhaps construction outside. "Data remains completely isolated from external threats," I finished, my voice tight. The footsteps were on the wooden stairs now. Thump, thump, thump. Each step was a hammer blow to my composure. "Don't you ignore me when I'm talking to you, Riley." The door to my makeshift room flew open. It hit the wall with a violence that made my laptop screen wobble. I saw Marcus's eyes flick up on the screen. "Mr. Vance frowned, tilting his head slightly. They heard it. Of course they heard it. My noise-canceling software could filter out the hum of the furnace, but it could not filter out the sheer sonic force of my stepmother, Lydia. I kept my eyes glued to the camera lens, praying she would stay out of the frame. If I didn't acknowledge her, maybe she would leave. Maybe she would realize I was working. "I am in the middle of a presentation," I whispered, barely moving my lips, hoping the microphone wouldn't pick it up. "I don't care what you are doing," Lydia's voice boomed. She stepped into the light. She didn't know about the camera. She didn't know about the Zoom call. All she saw was me, sitting in the dark basement with a glowing screen, wearing a blazer she probably thought I had bought with her money. She marched right into the space behind my chair, her face illuminated by the harsh backwash of the ring light. She looked disheveled, her face flushed with a mixture of wine and rage, clutching a piece of paper in her hand like a weapon. On my screen, the reaction was instant. The head of HR covered her mouth. "Mr. Vance's eyebrows shot up. "Lydia, please," I said, my professional mask slipping. "I am working. We can talk about this in 20 minutes. "Working?" Lydia scoffed, the sound sharp and cruel. She loomed over my shoulder, dominating the frame. "Is that what we call it now? Playing on the computer while the rest of us figure out how to keep the lights on?" "I just got the bill. Riley, $350. $350 for electricity this month." She waved the paper in front of my face, blocking the camera view for a second. "I will pay it," I said, my voice shaking. "I always pay it. Please, just let me finish this." "Oh, you will pay it all right," she hissed, leaning down. Her face was now clearly visible to everyone in the meeting, the tight jaw, the sneer of contempt. "You think because you hide down here in the dungeon like a rat that you don't use power? You think the water you shower with is free? Your father is upstairs stressing his heart out because he thinks we are going to lose the house, and you are down here playing pretend businesswoman." I reached for the mouse, desperate to click the stop video button, but my hands were shaking so badly I overshot the cursor. "Lydia, stop," I begged, abandoning the presentation script entirely. "There are people watching. This is a live call." "Don't you lie to me," she screamed. She didn't look at the screen. She never looked at what I was actually doing. To her, my job was a myth, a hobby I used to avoid chores. "You are not talking to anyone. You are just trying to get out of giving me the cash. I know you have it. I saw the mail from the bank." "Ms. Hartman?" Marcus's voice came through the speakers, confused and concerned. "Riley, is everything all right there?" Lydia froze. For a second, just 1 second, I thought the sound of a male voice would snap her out of it. Then her eyes narrowed. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at the laptop itself, as if the machine were the enemy. "Who is that?" she demanded. "Is that one of your little internet friends? You are chatting with men while I'm scrubbing floors?" "It is my boss, Lydia," I cried out, finally turning in my chair to face her. "It is my CEO. You are on camera. Please, just leave." "I am not going anywhere until I get what is mine." She lunged. It happened in slow motion, yet it was too fast to stop. Her hand, manicured and heavy with the gold rings I had helped pay for, shot out and grabbed the top of my laptop screen. "No!" I shouted, grabbing the base of the computer to stop her from snapping it shut. The image on the screen went wild. The camera angle jerked violently upward, showing the exposed pipes of the basement ceiling, then swung down dizzily to capture the floor, before settling at a crooked Dutch angle. It framed us perfectly. Me, half rising from my chair, terrified. Lydia, her face twisted into a mask of pure malice, gripping my blazer with her free hand. "Riley?" Marcus called out again, his voice louder this time. "Riley, do you need us to call someone?" "She doesn't need anyone," Lydia roared at the laptop, finally acknowledging the audience but clearly not understanding the gravity of who they were. "She needs to learn respect. She lives under my roof, she eats my food, and she treats me like a servant." "I pay for everything," I screamed back, the months of suppression finally cracking. "I paid for the roof. I paid for the car. I pay for Jenna's credit cards." That was the wrong thing to say. Mentioning her daughter, my half-sister, was the trigger. The mention of money was the spark, but Jenna was the gasoline. Lydia yanked me forward by my lapels. The chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor, a screeching sound that must have been deafening over the Zoom audio. I stumbled, my hip checking the desk, sending my notepad and water glass crashing to the floor. "You shut your mouth," Lydia spat, her face inches from mine, inches from the camera lens. "You ungrateful little leech. You don't talk about my daughter." "Let go of me," I gasped, trying to pry her fingers off my jacket. "I will let go when I am done with you," she snarled. And then she swung. It wasn't a shove. It wasn't a warning tap. It was a full, open-palmed slap, delivered with every ounce of frustration she had been hoarding for years. Crack. The sound was sickeningly crisp. It resonated through the high-definition microphone, amplified by the acoustics of the concrete room. My head snapped to the side. A sharp, stinging heat exploded across my left cheek, radiating into my ear and down my neck. The silence that followed was absolute. I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of a shelving unit. My hand flew to my face, my eyes wide, staring at her in shock. I had been yelled at before. I had been belittled, mocked, and financially drained. But she had never hit me. Not until now. Not until the one moment where the mask she wore for the neighbors was completely stripped away. Lydia stood there, breathing heavy, her hands still raised slightly, her chest heaving. She looked almost satisfied. On the crooked screen of my laptop, the grid of faces was frozen in horror. Mr. Vance had his hand over his mouth. Marcus was standing up, leaning toward his camera. "Riley!" Marcus shouted. "Riley, get out of there! We are recording this. We are calling the police." Lydia blinked, the words finally penetrating her rage. She looked at the laptop, really looked at it this time. She saw the rows of faces. She saw the recording icon blinking in the corner. She saw the company logos. For a moment, fear flickered in her eyes, but she tamped it down instantly, replacing it with a sneering arrogance. "She slipped," Lydia said, addressing the camera directly, smoothing her blouse as if nothing had happened. "She is clumsy, drama queen, just like her mother." She turned and marched out of the room, slamming the door so hard that dust rained down from the ceiling rafters. I stood there, trembling, my cheek throbbing with a pulse of its own. I looked at the camera. I looked at the people who held my career in their hands. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Hot and humiliating. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to sink into the concrete floor and never resurface. I reached out a shaking hand to end the meeting, to cut the connection and curl into a ball. But before my finger clicked the red button, my eyes caught a movement in the bottom corner of the participant list. Most of the participants were labeled with their full names and titles: Marcus Thorne, CEO, David Vance, Client Lead. But there was one square that had been silent the entire time, a black square that had just flickered on. The camera feed activated. It was a woman sitting in a home office lined with legal textbooks. She had sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a look of cold, calculated fury that matched the burning sensation on my cheek. The display name read, Valerie P., Observer. My Aunt Valerie, my mother's sister, the woman Lydia had banned from the house 15 years ago, the woman who happened to be one of the most vicious domestic law attorneys in the state. She wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at the camera lens, at the space where Lydia had just been standing. And then, deliberately, she held up a hand and tapped a key on her keyboard. She wasn't just watching, she was saving the file. I didn't end the call. I just stared back at her, and for the first time in my life, I realized that the worst moment of my existence might actually be the beginning of my freedom. To understand why I froze on that call, why I let a woman slap me across the face while my boss watched, you have to understand the architecture of the trap I was living in. It was not a cage made of iron bars. It was built out of guilt, obligation, and 1,000 tiny comments that chipped away at my reality until I barely recognized it. 6 months before the Zoom incident, I was living in Philadelphia. I had a studio apartment that smelled like roasted coffee and independence. I had a life. But when Northline Dynamics announced the restructuring, shifting 50% of the project management team to remote positions to cut overhead. I did the math. The rent in the city was eating 40% of my take-home pay. My father, Thomas, had been hospitalized twice that year with heart palpitations. It seemed like the logical, responsible adult decision to move back to Riverton. I could save for a down payment on my own house, keep an eye on Dad, and help out with the bills. I thought I was moving in as a daughter. Lydia saw me moving in as a bank draft. My father had been a mechanic for 40 years. His hands were permanently stained with grease, and his back was bent from decades of leaning under hoods. He was a good man, but he was tired. He had married Lydia 3 years after my mother died, and I think he did it mostly because he didn't know how to be alone. Lydia was sharp, loud, and obsessed with the appearance of success. She treated the house not as a home, but as a stage set for a play called The Perfect Family, and she was the director. I was cast in the role of the charity case. The narrative Lydia spun for the neighbors, for the church group, and eventually for me, was that I had crawled back home because I couldn't hack it in the big city. "We are just happy to give Riley a soft place to land," she would tell Mrs. Gable from next door while standing on the porch. "It is hard for young people these days. Not everyone has the drive that Jenna has." Jenna was my half-sister. She was 24 years old and listed her occupation on social media as lifestyle curator. In reality, this meant she spent her days driving to scenic locations to take photos of lattes she didn't drink and outfits she couldn't afford. The first week I moved into the basement, Lydia sat me down at the kitchen table. She had a calculator and a notepad ready. "Now, Riley," she said, tapping her pen on the table, "we are family, so we are not going to charge you market rent. That would be cruel. But you are a grown woman. You need to contribute. It is only fair." I nodded, agreeing. "Of course. What were you thinking?" $800 a month, she said, plus a share of the utilities. It was steep for a damp basement in Riverton, but I agreed. I wanted to be helpful. I wrote the first check that afternoon. But the contribution did not stop there. 2 weeks later, the furnace made a sound like a dying animal and quit. It was mid-November in Pennsylvania. The house was freezing. My father was sitting on the couch wrapped in 2 blankets, looking pale and defeated. Lydia was pacing the kitchen, wringing her hands. "There is no money in the emergency fund," she wailed, looking pointedly at me. "Your father's medication took it all. I don't know what we are going to do. I guess we will just freeze." She didn't ask. She never asked directly. She just created a vacuum of crisis that only money could fill. And she knew I was the only one with a liquidity source. "I can cover it," I said, pulling out my credit card. "You can pay me back when the tax refund comes in." The new furnace cost $4,500. I put it on my card. Lydia hugged me, tears in her eyes, telling me I was a savior. When tax season came and went, I brought it up. Lydia looked at me with genuine confusion. "Riley, honey, that money went to the property taxes. You wouldn't want us to lose the house, would you? After all, it is where you are living." That was the hook. It is where you are living. By the 3rd month, the boundaries had dissolved completely. I wasn't just paying rent. I was paying for the groceries that filled the fridge, premium steaks and organic wines that Lydia liked. Even though I ate sandwiches at my desk downstairs, I paid for the high-speed internet upgrade because Jenna complained that her upload speeds were throttling her engagement. I was the only person in the house with a steady 9-to-5 income. Yet at dinner every night, I was treated like an intruder. Dinner was a ritual. We would sit at the mahogany table, which I had paid to have refinished after Jenna spilled nail polish remover on it, and Lydia would hold court. "Jenna has a potential partnership with a swimwear brand," Lydia announced one Tuesday. Beaming at my sister, Jenna was scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. "They are going to send her free samples. It is a big step." "That is great," I said, cutting into a piece of chicken. "I actually just closed the beta phase for the hospital project. We are moving to implementation next week." Lydia waved her hand dismissively. "That is nice, Riley. But you know, staring at a screen all day isn't healthy. You look pale." "Jenna, Tell your sister about that skin cream you are using. Maybe it can help her." My father kept his head down, pushing peas around his plate. He knew. I could see it in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew I was paying for the food in his mouth, but he was too afraid of Lydia's temper to acknowledge it. "Dad," I said softly, "did you get the appointment for the cardiologist?" "Yes," he mumbled. "Next month." "It is expensive," Lydia interjected, her voice sharp. "The copay is ridiculous, but we manage. We always manage to scrape by, don't we, Thomas? Even with extra mouths to feed." She looked right at me. I put my fork down. "Lydia, I pay $800 a month. I bought the groceries for this meal. I paid the electric bill last week." The table went silent. Jenna looked up from her phone, eyes wide, anticipating drama. Lydia let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, listen to her. You buy a few bags of carrots and think you own the place? Do you know what a mortgage costs, Riley? Do you know what the insurance costs? You are getting a steal living here. Anywhere else, you would be paying double. You should be grateful we opened our doors to you after you failed in Philadelphia." "I didn't fail," I said, my voice tight. "I was transferred. I make good money." "Then why are you living in a basement?" she countered smoothly. It was a circular argument I could never win. If I had money, I should give it to them because they were struggling. If I didn't give it to them, I was a leech. The breaking point of my patience, though not my compliance, came with the roof. It was April. Heavy rains had exposed a leak in the master bedroom. Lydia was hysterical. She claimed black mold was going to kill my father if we didn't fix it immediately. She called a contractor, got a quote for $12,000, and then sat at the kitchen table crying until I came upstairs. "We can't get a loan," she sobbed. "Our credit score took a hit when the business slowed down." She was talking about her interior design consultation business, which, as far as I could tell, consisted of her buying expensive furniture for our house and claiming it was a showroom. "I can't put $12,000 on a card. Lydia," I said, "that is my entire savings for a down payment." "It is for your father's health," she screamed. "Do you want him to die? Is that it? You are holding on to money while your father breathes in mold?" My father sat in the corner, looking gray and small. "Riley," he whispered, "please, just for a little while, I will pay you back for my pension checks, $200 a month." I did the math in my head. At $200 a month, it would take him 5 years to pay me back. But looking at his face, I couldn't say no. I transferred the money. 2 weeks later, I came home from a rare coffee run to find a brand new car in the driveway. It was a white SUV, leather interior, with a big red bow on the dashboard. Lydia was showing it to the neighbor. I walked up the driveway, my blood running cold. "Lydia, whose car is this?" "It is ours," she squealed, clapping her hands. "Can you believe it? The dealership was having a zero-down promotion. The monthly payments are a stretch, but we needed safe transportation. The old sedan was a death trap." "You said you had no money," I said, my voice low so the neighbor wouldn't hear. "You took my $12,000 for the roof because you said you were broke, and now you have a $500 a month car payment?" Lydia's smile vanished instantly. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to that dangerous hiss I would later hear on the Zoom call. "Don't you dare embarrass me in front of the neighbors," she whispered. "The roof is fixed. The money is spent. Stop counting pennies. Riley, it is unbecoming. A daughter helps her parents. That is the way the world works. Don't make this into a thing." She turned back to the neighbor, her smile bright and fake. "Riley is just shocked. She knows how hard we have worked for this." I went downstairs to my basement. I sat on my folding chair and stared at the concrete wall. I felt sick. I felt used. But more than that, I felt a sudden, cold clarity. I was not a daughter here. I was a resource, and resources get depleted. I opened my laptop, but not for work. I opened a blank spreadsheet. For the first time, I didn't just pay the bill and throw the receipt in the trash. I logged it. Date, April 14th. Item, roof repair. Hartman Residence. Amount, $12,250. Payer, Riley Hartman. Promised repayment, never. I went back through my bank statements. I found the grocery runs, the furnace, the internet bill, the time Jenna borrowed my credit card to buy a flight to Miami for a networking event that turned out to be a spring break party. $600 she promised to Venmo me, but never did. I logged every cent. I found the transfer for the car insurance I paid because Lydia said it had lapsed. I found the cash withdrawals I made when she said she needed money for groceries, but came back with a new handbag. I typed until my fingers hurt. The final column at the bottom of the spreadsheet was a number that made me want to vomit. In 6 months, I had poured nearly $28,000 into this house. Lydia thought I was weak. She thought I was just the quiet girl in the basement who would keep signing checks to buy their love. She didn't realize that in my day job, my entire career was built on tracking data, managing risks, and documenting failures. She had turned her life into a project, and I was just beginning the audit. The hallway outside the kitchen was the only part of the house where the floorboards did not creak. I had learned this by accident during my first week in the basement, and by my 3rd month, it had become a survival skill. I could move from the basement door to the bathroom without making a sound, a ghost in a house that I was paying for. It was a Tuesday night, roughly 3 weeks before the incident with the Zoom call. I had come upstairs to refill my water bottle, my throat parched from 4 hours of drafting project proposals. The house was dark, save for the sliver of yellow light spilling from under the kitchen door. I was about to push it open when I heard my name. "I just don't see why we have to wait," Jenna said. Her voice was whiny, the tone of a teenager, even though she was 24 years old. "I am tired of telling people I live with my parents. It is embarrassing. When do I get the title? You promised." I froze. My hand hovered over the brass doorknob. The water bottle in my other hand suddenly felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Lydia's voice answered, lower and smoother, the sound of a knife spreading butter. "Patience, honey. These things take finesse. We can't just transfer the deed while the old mortgage is still hanging over our heads. The bank would ask too many questions." "So pay it off," Jenna snapped. I heard the clink of a glass on the granite countertop. "You said we had the money." "We are getting there," Lydia said. "But we need the renovation loan first. That is the key. Once that second line of credit is approved and we use it to upgrade the property value, the refinancing will go through. Then, when the new paperwork is drawn up, your name goes on the deed as the primary beneficiary, and the basement dweller's name stays off." The air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. I stood there, blinking in the dark. Renovation loan? There were no renovations happening. The roof was fixed. The furnace was new. What were they talking about? "But won't she notice?" Jenna asked. "She works in business or whatever. She is going to read the papers." Lydia laughed. It was a soft, dismissive sound that hurt more than a shout. "Riley, please. She doesn't read anything I put in front of her. She is so desperate to be a good daughter and keep the peace that she just signs whatever I tell her is for the house insurance or the tax adjustment. I tell her it is to help your father, and she grabs the pen. She is useful. Jenna, her credit score is over 750. Yours is recovering. We need her standing on the ladder so you can climb up to the roof. Once you are up there, we kick the ladder away." I felt a physical wave of nausea roll through me. I stepped back, my socked feet sliding silently on the hardwood. I didn't want to hear anymore. I couldn't hear anymore. Part of me wanted to burst through that door and scream. I wanted to demand to see these papers she was talking about. But a smaller, more pathetic part of me, the part that had moved back home because I was lonely and scared of the world, refused to believe it. They were just talking. I told myself it was just Lydia showing off to her daughter, pretending to be a financial mastermind. They wouldn't actually steal the house from under me. They wouldn't use my credit to fund a loan I didn't know about. That was illegal. That was what criminals did, not family. I turned around and crept back down the stairs, my water bottle still empty. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, staring at the glowing standby light of my monitor, trying to force the conversation out of my head. 2 days later, The universe tried to warn me again. I was in a company-wide all-hands meeting on Zoom. It was standard quarterly stuff until the head of HR took the virtual stage. She was talking about updated benefits packages, specifically regarding mental health and domestic safety. We are implementing a new support structure for employees dealing with domestic instability, she said, her voice crisp and professional through my headphones. This includes financial coercion, which is often an invisible form of abuse. If you feel that your financial agency is being compromised by a partner or family member, Northline has resources to help you secure your accounts. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I looked at the grid of faces on the screen. My colleagues, drinking coffee, looking bored, checking their phones. Did they know? Could they see it on me? I moved my mouse and clicked Stop Video. It felt too close. It felt like she was looking right through the screen at me. Financial coercion. The term tasted like ash. I told myself I turned the camera off because my internet connection was unstable. I lied to myself that I didn't need those resources. I wasn't being abused. I was just helping my dad. Helping family is expensive. That is just how it is. But the seed of doubt had been planted in the kitchen, and now it was sprouting roots. That weekend, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It was subtle, but I felt it. Lydia was nicer than usual, asking if I wanted leftover lasagna, smiling with too many teeth. My father, however, was worse. He had been spending more time in the garage with his hidden stash of bourbon. On Saturday night, I found him in the living room, staring blankly at a rerun of a fishing show. The volume was too loud. "Dad?" I asked, walking in. "Do you want some water?" He looked up at me, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He looked old. Not just aged, but worn down, like a tire with no tread left. "You are a good girl, Riley," he slurred slightly. "You work hard." "Thanks, Dad," I said, reaching for the remote to turn the volume down. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, shaking. "You just need to keep helping, okay? Lydia says, if you don't contribute more, if you don't step up, then things are going to change, and I can't stop it." I pulled my hand away gently. "What do you mean, change? I pay for almost everything. Dad, what more does she want?" He shook his head, looking back at the TV, refusing to meet my eyes again. "Just don't make her angry. She is smart, Riley. She knows how the money works. Just don't be difficult. If you are difficult, don't blame me when the roof comes down." "The roof is fixed," I said, confused. "I paid for it." "Not that roof," he mumbled, closing his eyes. He passed out on the recliner 5 minutes later. I put a blanket over him, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Don't blame me when things change. It wasn't a request for help. It was a warning from a man who had already surrendered. The final crack in the dam happened the following Tuesday morning. I was working at my desk in the basement, clearing out my junk email folder. I usually deleted everything without looking: promotions, newsletters, spam. But one subject line caught my eye because of the bank logo next to it. It was from a major national bank, one where I had my primary checking account. Subject: confirmation of your new Platinum Rewards card dispatch. I frowned. I hadn't applied for a new credit card. I didn't need a new credit card. I clicked on the email, assuming it was a phishing scam. It looked legitimate. It had my full name. It referenced the last 4 digits of my social security number. "Dear Riley Hartman, congratulations. Your application has been approved. Your new card with a limit of $15,000 has been mailed to the address on file." I scrolled down to check the address. 142 Maple Drive, Riverton, PA. My dad's house, my house. My stomach dropped. I sat back in my chair, the damp air of the basement suddenly feeling suffocating. I hadn't applied for this. I hadn't signed anything. Then I remembered Lydia's voice from the hallway. She just signs whatever I tell her is for the house insurance. Had I? Had she slipped a credit card application in with the papers for the car insurance transfer? Had she forged my signature? Or had she simply applied online? knowing all my information because I left my purse on the kitchen counter when I cooked dinner? $15,000. I reached for my phone to call the bank. My thumb hovered over the dial button, but I didn't press it. Why didn't I press it? Because if I called, and they told me it was real, and they told me who applied for it, I would have to admit that I was living with thieves. I would have to admit that my father knew. I would have to admit that the family I was sacrificing my future for was actively cannibalizing me. I wasn't ready to blow it all up. Not yet. I was scared. If I accused Lydia of fraud, she would throw me out. I had nowhere to go. I had depleted my savings fixing their house. I was trapped. So I did the only thing I felt I could do. I logged into my online banking portal. There it was, sitting at the bottom of the dashboard. Pending account. Platinum rewards. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. I took a screenshot. It was the first piece of hard evidence I saved. I didn't know then that I was gathering ammunition. At that moment, I just wanted to see if I was going crazy. I saved the image to a hidden folder on my desktop, naming it Error Log 01. I closed the laptop and went upstairs to make dinner, smiling at Lydia when she asked how my day was. Fine, I said, slicing cucumbers with a knife that felt very sharp in my hand. Just another day at the office. Lydia smiled back, but her eyes flicked to my purse on the counter. That is good. Riley. Oh, by the way, there is some mail coming for you. Just junk offers. I think I will sort it for you when it arrives. Thanks, I said. You are too helpful. I ate dinner, swallowed the bile rising in my throat, and waited. The trap was set, but for the first time, I wasn't just the prey. I was the witness, and I was starting to pay attention. The email from headquarters arrived on a Thursday, 3 days before the meeting, carrying a subject line that made my pulse hammer in my throat. Strategic Expansion Proposal, Final Review. It was an ultimatum wrapped in corporate politeness. Northline Dynamics was looking to appoint a new senior director for the Northeast region. Marcus, the CEO, had personally selected me to present the hospital integration plan. He called it a one-shot opportunity. If I landed this client, the promotion was mine. If I stumbled, the restructure would continue without me. The salary bump attached to that title was substantial enough to clear my debts, fix my credit, and get me into an apartment where I didn't have to listen to the furnace rattle all night. It was my exit ticket. But in the Hartman house, any sign of my potential independence was treated like a threat. The night before the presentation, Lydia cornered me in the kitchen while I was trying to make a pot of coffee to fuel a late-night prep session. She slammed a brochure onto the counter next to the coffee maker. It was for a high-end event planning service. Jenna needs a deposit for her engagement party, Lydia said, not bothering with a greeting. I blinked, looking from the glossy brochure to Lydia's tight, expectant face. Jenna is engaged? Since when? She broke up with Mark last week. She is back with him, Lydia said, waving her hand as if the details of her daughter's relationship were trivial. He is going to propose on the weekend. We need to book the venue now to ensure we get the date. It is $3,000 for the deposit. $3,000, I repeated, my voice flat. Lydia, I just paid Dad's emergency room bill. It was $2,400. I showed you the receipt. I don't have $3,000 for a party that hasn't even been announced yet. Lydia's eyes narrowed. The air in the kitchen turned sharp. So you are saying Jenna doesn't deserve to be happy? Is that it? You are jealous because she is getting married and you are 32 and single? I am saying I don't have the money, I said, gripping the handle of the coffee pot. I am tapped out. I have a major presentation tomorrow. I need to focus. Focus on this, Lydia hissed, leaning in close. You find that money, Riley, or you will find your life in this house getting very difficult. I walked away. I went downstairs, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and worked until 4 a.m. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could navigate the tension like I always did, by keeping my head down and doing my job. I was wrong. The morning of the presentation, the house was vibrating. At 8:30 in the morning, 30 minutes before the call, bass-heavy pop music began thumping from the living room directly above my desk. It was loud enough to shake the dust off the exposed pipes in the ceiling. I ran upstairs, panic rising in my chest. Lydia was in the living room, aggressively vacuuming the same spot on the rug, the stereo system blasting at full volume. "Lydia!" I shouted over the noise. "Please, I have the meeting in 30 minutes." She didn't turn off the vacuum. She just looked at me, shouted, "What?" and kept cleaning. I marched over and turned the music down. "I need 1 hour," I pleaded, my hands shaking. "Just 1 hour of silence. This meeting decides my career. Please." Lydia stopped the vacuum. The silence that followed was heavy and hostile. She looked me up and down, sneering at my blazer and pajama bottoms. "This house is not your studio. Riley," she said coldly, "I have cleaning to do. Jenna has friends coming over. We are not going to tiptoe around just because you are playing executive in the basement." "It is 1 hour," I said, my voice cracking. "After that, you can do whatever you want." She didn't answer. She just turned the vacuum back on. I retreated to the basement. I checked my microphone settings. I adjusted the noise suppression software to the maximum level. I prayed. At 9 o'clock sharp, the Zoom window opened. Marcus was there, looking crisp in his office in Chicago. Mr. Vance, the client from the hospital network, joined a second later, flanked by 2 serious-looking assistants. And then there was the observer, the legal consultant Marcus had mentioned, a black square simply labeled Valerie P. I took a deep breath, pasted a smile on my face, and began. For 20 minutes, I was perfect. The adrenaline overrode the exhaustion. I navigated the slides, answered technical questions about data encryption, and charmed Mr. Vance. The noise suppression was working. They couldn't hear the vacuum cleaner upstairs. I was winning. I could feel the promotion in my grasp. Then the basement door opened. It wasn't a creak, it was a slam. The noise cut through my audio filter like a gunshot. Mr. Vance blinked, looking confused. Marcus leaned forward. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I kept my eyes on the camera, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "As you can see on the timeline," I said, my voice pitching up slightly. "Phase 2 begins in—" "I checked the account. Riley!" Lydia's voice was a physical blow. She didn't walk down the stairs. She stomped. I saw Marcus's eyes widen. "I am in a meeting," I whispered, engaging the mute button quickly. I turned in my chair, pleading with my eyes. "Lydia, get out. Now." "Don't you mute me," she screamed. She closed the distance between the stairs and my desk in 3 strides. She reached over my shoulder and hit the keyboard, unmuting the microphone. "I went to the ATM," she yelled, her face looming into the frame, lit by the harsh ring light I had set up. "Insufficient funds? You embarrass me like that? I promised the venue the deposit would be there by noon." "We are live," I said, pointing at the screen, desperation clawing at my throat. "Lydia, that is the CEO of my company." "I don't care if it is the President of the United States," she roared. "You transfer that money right now. Open the app. Do it." "Ms. Hartman?" Mr. Vance's voice came through the speakers, tinny and shocked. "Is everything all right?" Lydia ignored him. She grabbed the shoulder of my blazer. "You think you can hide money from me? You think you can live here for free while my daughter cries because her party is ruined?" "I paid the medical bill," I shouted back, forgetting the client, forgetting the promotion, forgetting everything but the injustice of it. "I paid Dad's bill. I have nothing left." "Liar." She yanked me. The chair tipped. The world tilted sideways. The carefully curated background of my office vanished, replaced by the chaotic reality of the basement, the boxes of old clothes, the rusted water heater, the peeling paint. I scrambled to stand up, trying to shield the laptop, trying to block the camera. "End the call," I thought. Just end the call. But Lydia was faster. She grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. She wasn't looking at the computer. She was looking at me with a hatred so pure it stole the breath from my lungs. "You hang up that meaningless call right now," she spat, shaking my arm. "You are nobody. Riley, you are just a signature. You are just a cosigner. Don't you think for 1 second you are important enough to say no to me?" The words hung in the air, captured in high-definition audio. "You are just a cosigner." It was the confession. It was the truth of my existence in that house, spoken aloud for the world to hear. On the screen, the room in New York had gone deadly silent. Marcus was standing up, his hand reaching toward his own screen as if he could intervene physically. "Riley," he shouted. "Riley, get away from her!" Lydia heard him this time. She looked at the laptop, her eyes wild. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. She saw the machine as the source of my defiance. "You listen to me," she snarled at the camera, or maybe at me, the lines blurring in her rage. I tried to pull away. "Lydia, stop!" She raised her hand. I flinched, but I couldn't move back fast enough. The desk was behind me. The slap didn't sound like it does in movies. It was a wet, heavy crack that echoed off the concrete walls. It was the sound of skin breaking against skin. The force of it threw my head back. I stumbled, my hip colliding with the edge of the desk. The laptop slid. It teetered on the edge for a fraction of a second, then fell. It didn't hit the floor face down. It landed on its side, wedged against a stack of National Geographic magazines. The camera was now pointing up at a severe angle. It framed me, clutching my cheek, eyes wide with shock. And it framed Lydia, standing over me, her hand still raised, her chest heaving, her face twisted into a mask of triumphant cruelty. "You will transfer it," she said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "Or you can pack your trash and get out." She turned and walked toward the stairs, the sound of her heels clicking on the concrete fading away. I couldn't breathe. My cheek was burning. My ear was ringing. I slowly slid down the side of the desk until I was sitting on the floor. I looked at the laptop. The screen was sideways, but the connection was still live. Mr. Vance was pale, staring at the camera with a look of absolute horror. Marcus was on his phone, presumably calling the police or security. But my eyes locked onto the bottom corner of the screen. The black square labeled Valerie P., Observer, was no longer just a static image. The red recording dot was pulsing steadily. I reached out with a trembling hand and pulled the laptop upright. I looked into the lens. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just let them see me. I let them see the red mark blooming on my face. I let them see the tears that I refused to wipe away. I saw Aunt Valerie's face on the screen now. She had turned her camera on. She wasn't looking at me with the pity I expected. She was looking at me with a fierce, steely resolve. She nodded, just once. I realized then that the secret I had been protecting, the shame of my life in that basement, was gone. It had been ripped away, and in its place, there was something else. The entire boardroom had just witnessed a crime, and the camera never lies. I slammed the laptop shut. The snap of the plastic casing closing was the only sound in the basement. The screen went black, extinguishing the faces of the CEO, the client, and my aunt. But the image of my own humiliation seemed to be burned onto my retinas. I sat there in the sudden dimness, my hands trembling so violently that I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady them. I had done it. I had finally destroyed my career. In my mind, the narrative was already written. I was no longer Riley Hartman, the capable project manager. I was the girl who got slapped by her mommy on the corporate intranet. I was the liability. I was the drama. I could imagine the emails flying back and forth between the New York office and Chicago right now, discussing how to quietly sever ties with the unstable woman who lived in a basement and couldn't control her domestic environment. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and walked to the door at the top of the stairs. I didn't open it. I turned the deadbolt. It was a flimsy lock, one I had installed myself for privacy, but today it felt like the only barrier between me and a monster. From the kitchen above, I heard the heavy tread of my father's boots. He must have come in from the garage when he heard the shouting. "Lydia?" His voice was muffled through the floorboards. "What happened?" I heard screaming. I held my breath, pressing my ear against the cold wood of the door. "It was your daughter." Lydia's voice floated down, shrill and dripping with performative victimhood. "She was hysterical. Thomas, I just went down to ask her about the grocery list, and she started screaming at me. She told me to get out. She threw a book at me." "She threw a book?" My father sounded tired, not angry, just weary. "She is under so much pressure," Lydia continued, her voice softening into that manipulative coo she used when she wanted something. "I think she is having a breakdown. I tried to calm her down, and she just lunged at me. I had to push her away to protect myself. My heart is racing. Thomas, I don't feel safe with her down there right now." I slid down the door until I hit the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. She was rewriting history while the ink was still wet, and the worst part was, I knew my father would believe her. He always believed her because it was easier than confronting the reality that he had married a predator. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I flinched. I didn't want to look. I expected a termination notice. I expected a text from Jenna mocking me, but the buzzing persisted. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. The sender was Marcus Thorne, CEO. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. This was it, the firing squad. I opened the email, bracing myself for the professional goodbye. Subject: Please read immediately. Your safety. Riley. Please do not worry about the presentation. David and I are handling the client. Your employment is secure. Our primary concern right now is your physical safety. What we witnessed was unacceptable. HR will be reaching out to you shortly. Please know that the session was recorded. We have the footage. You are not alone in this. Marcus. I read the email 3 times. I traced the words on the screen with my thumb. We have the footage. They didn't see a clumsy daughter. They saw a victim. 5 minutes later, the phone rang. It was the Director of Human Resources. Her voice was not the crisp, corporate tone I was used to. It was soft, urgent, and incredibly serious. "Riley," she said, "I am recording this call for your protection. Are you in a safe place right now? Can you speak freely?" "I am in the basement," I whispered. "The door is locked." "Okay," she said. "Listen to me. We have a zero-tolerance policy for violence against our employees. Regardless of where they are working, what we saw today constitutes domestic assault. Do you want us to contact law enforcement on your behalf?" I froze. Law enforcement? Police at the house? The image of a squad car pulling up to the driveway, the neighbors watching, my father having a heart attack from the stress. It was too much. "No," I said quickly. "No police. Please. It was just a fight. It got out of hand." "Riley," the HR director said, and there was a steeliness in her voice now. "That was not a fight. You were seated. You were working. You were struck by another adult. That is battery. We are going to file an incident report internally. If you decide to take legal action later, we will provide the video evidence. Take the rest of the week off. Full pay. Do not log in. Just get safe." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence. For years. I had told myself that Lydia was just difficult or passionate. I had normalized the shouting, the insults, the financial demands, but a stranger from HR had just named it battery. Another vibration. This time, a text message. It was from a number I hadn't saved, but I knew who it was immediately. "Aunt Valerie. Meet me at the grind on 4th Street in 30 minutes. Don't tell anyone. Bring your phone." I stared at the message. Valerie. She had seen it all. She had pressed record. I grabbed my purse. I waited until I heard the television turn on upstairs, signaling that Lydia and my father had settled into their evening routine of ignoring each other. I unlocked the basement door, crept up the stairs, and bypassed the kitchen entirely, slipping out the side door that led to the driveway. I didn't take my car. Lydia would hear the engine. I walked the 6 blocks to the coffee shop, the cool evening air stinging the red mark on my cheek. Valerie was sitting in a booth at the back, far away from the windows. She had a laptop open and a cup of black coffee steaming in front of her. She looked exactly as I remembered from childhood, formidable, sharp, and entirely unbothered by pleasantries. She didn't hug me. She pointed to the seat opposite her. "Sit," she said. She looked at my cheek, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. "You should ice that, but not yet. I want to take a picture of it first." "Valerie, Picture first," she commanded. She pulled out her phone and snapped 3 photos of my face from different angles. "Evidence is perishable, Riley. Shame lasts forever. But bruises fade. We need the bruise." She put the phone down and looked at me. "I assume you think your life is over." "I was humiliated in front of the entire executive board," I said, my voice shaking. "Lydia told Dad I threw a book at her. He believes her." "Of course he does," Valerie said dismissively. "Thomas has been sleepwalking through his life for a decade. I am not interested in Thomas right now. I am interested in the video. I watched it 3 times on my way over here." She turned her laptop around so I could see the screen. It was paused on the frame where Lydia was screaming at me. "Look at her face," Valerie said. "That is not loss of control. That is entitlement. She felt comfortable hitting you because she thinks she owns you. And why does she think she owns you, Riley?" "Because I live in her house," I mumbled. "No," Valerie corrected. "Because you are her bank. I heard what you screamed back at her. You said you paid the medical bill. You said you pay for everything." I looked down at the table. "I help out. Dad is sick." "Helping out is buying groceries once a month," Valerie said, her voice dropping low. "What you are doing is funding a lifestyle they cannot afford. Tell me everything. Start with the big numbers." And so, for the first time in 3 years, I spilled it all. I told her about the roof repair that cost $12,000. I told her about the furnace. I told her about the car payments I made because Lydia claimed the insurance would lapse. I told her about Jenna's credit card that I was somehow responsible for. I told her about the hallway conversation I had overheard, the renovation loan, the refinancing, the plan to put Jenna's name on the deed. Valerie didn't interrupt. She took notes in a small yellow legal pad. Her pen moved furiously across the paper. When I mentioned the email about the Platinum Rewards card I never applied for, Valerie stopped writing. "Stop," she said. "Say that again." "I got an email," I said. "From the bank. It said a card with a $15,000 limit was mailed to the house. I never applied for it. I was going to call. But you didn't," Valerie finished for me, "because you were afraid of what you would find." She ripped the page off the legal pad and set it between us. "Riley, this isn't just a toxic stepmother," Valerie said, tapping the paper with her index finger. "This is a criminal enterprise. Applying for credit in your name without your consent is identity theft, fraud. Using your income to qualify for loans that don't go into the house, that is mortgage fraud. Coercing you to pay bills under threat of eviction or emotional abuse, that is financial extortion." She leaned forward. "That slap on the Zoom call? That was the best thing she could have ever done for you, because now we have the hook. The violence opens the door for a protective order. And once we have the protective order, we can subpoena the financial records without her permission." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You want to sue her?" "I want to bury her," Valerie said calmly. "But we need hard data. You said you have a spreadsheet?" "Yes." "Tonight," Valerie said, "you are going to go back into that basement. You are not going to engage with them. You are going to lock the door. You are going to log into every single banking portal you have. You are going to download the full statements for the last 24 months, not the summaries, the full CSV files." "What am I looking for?" I asked. "Patterns," she said. "Look for recurring transfers to entities you don't recognize. Look for cash withdrawals that happen on the same day you get paid. Look for signatures on PDF copies of checks that don't look like yours." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was cool and dry. "They have been bleeding you dry, Riley, and they were planning to throw away the carcass once they got the house. You have to decide right now. Are you the daughter who takes the slap? Or are you the project manager who fixes the glitch? I looked at her. I thought about the way Lydia had looked at the camera, the arrogance, the certainty that she could hit me and get away with it. I will get the files, I said. I walked back to the house in the dark. The windows were glowing warm and yellow, looking like the perfect suburban home. Inside, Lydia was probably drinking wine, telling herself she had won. I slipped back into the basement. I could hear the television still blaring upstairs. I sat down at my desk and woke up my computer. I didn't open my work email. I opened my banking tab. I started with the primary checking account. I downloaded the statements from January of last year. I opened the file. Rows and rows of data filled the screen. Target, grocery store, gas station. Then I saw it. Transfer to XTACT, ending in 449. $2,000. Date, February 3rd. I didn't recognize an account ending in 449. I scrolled down. Transfer to XTACT, ending in 449. $1,500. Date, March 10th. I cross-referenced the dates. February 3rd was the day I gave Lydia money for the emergency plumbing repair. March 10th was when she said the property tax was due. I went deeper. I logged into the credit card portal, the one I used for household expenses. I looked at the transaction details for the lumberyard charge that Lydia said was for the deck repair. $5,000. I clicked on the merchant details. The merchant name was listed as Hartman Household Renovations, LLC. I frowned. That wasn't a lumberyard. That sounded like a business. I opened a new tab and searched the state business registry. I typed in Hartman Household Renovations, LLC. The search result popped up in less than a second. Registered agent, Lydia Hartman. Principal address, 142 Maple Drive. Date of incorporation, 2 years ago. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. There was no contractor. There was no lumberyard. There was no plumber. Every time I wrote a check for a repair, every time I transferred money for a bill, I wasn't paying a service provider. I was transferring money directly into a shell company Lydia had set up. She was invoicing me for living in my own house and pocketing the cash. I looked at the total amount transferred to that LLC over the last 2 years. It was over $45,000. I wasn't just a victim of bad luck. I was the primary investor in a fraudulent scheme designed to bankrupt me. I looked at the bruised reflection of my face in the dark monitor. The shame evaporated. The sadness vanished. In their place, a cold, hard anger settled in my chest, heavy and solid as a stone. I picked up my phone and texted Valerie. I have the files. It is worse than we thought. She has an LLC. Valerie's reply came instantly. Good. Don't sleep. We have work to do. The printer in the corner of my basement office had been humming for 3 hours. It was a rhythmic, mechanical sound that usually blended into the background of my workday. But tonight, it sounded like a gavel coming down. Page after page. I was no longer crying. I was no longer shaking. The part of me that was the scared stepdaughter had been silenced by the part of me that managed multi-million-dollar implementation projects. I was in audit mode. My Aunt Valerie stayed on the video call with me, her face grim but focused on the second monitor. She guided me through the digital forensic process with the precision of a surgeon. Download the transaction history for the last 3 years, Valerie instructed. Sort by recipient. Filter for that LLC. I did as she asked. The spreadsheet populated, and the sum at the bottom of the column made my stomach turn, not with nausea, but with cold fury. Hartman Household Renovations, LLC. I had found the registration earlier, but now I was looking at the granular details of the theft. I pulled up the invoices Lydia had given me over the years, crumpled receipts for lumber, contractor fees, and emergency electrical work. I cross-referenced them with the bank transfers. Valerie, I said, my voice steady, look at this. On August 12th, I transferred $3,500 for roof sealants. The money went to the LLC account. 2 days later, on August 14th, There is a debit from the LLC account for $3,000 to Luxury Escapes Travel Agency. She used your roof money to book a vacation, Valerie said flatly. And she probably told your father she won the trip in a raffle or saved up from her design business. It gets worse, I said, clicking open an archived email folder I hadn't looked at in 2 years. I searched for the keyword urgent. Lydia always used urgency as a weapon. I found an email from 18 months ago. The subject line was, "Please sign ASAP, bank deadline." I opened the attachment. It was a PDF document for a secondary loan, a line of credit secured against the equity of the house. I remembered this day. Lydia had come running downstairs, phone to her ear, claiming the bank needed a witness signature immediately or the bank would freeze my father's assets. I had signed it digitally between meetings, barely reading the fine print. "I found the loan document," I told Valerie. "I am sending it to you." I watched Valerie read it on her screen. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. "Riley," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "you didn't witness this document. You are the co-borrower." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "Look at page 4, she commanded. "Clause 7, primary obligor. That is you. Your income was used to secure the loan because Thomas doesn't have the credit score. But look at the disbursement instructions on page 9. I scrolled down. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until I found the bank account number listed for the funds to be deposited into. It wasn't the joint family account. It wasn't my father's account. It was an account ending in 099. "That is a joint account held by Lydia Hartman and Jenna Hartman," Valerie said. "I can tell by the routing code structure. It is a custodial setup she likely converted when Jenna turned 18. You signed a loan for $25,000. You are responsible for paying it back, but the cash went directly to them." "That is fraud," I whispered. "It is more than fraud," Valerie corrected. "It is fraud by inducement. She used her position of authority and your emotional distress regarding your father to coerce you into signing a financial instrument that benefited her exclusively. In the eyes of the law, that is theft by deception." I leaned back in my chair. I thought about all the times Lydia had told me, "It is just a small paper," or, "If you don't help, we lose the house." It wasn't panic. It was a script. She had been reading lines from a con artist's playbook, and I had been the perfect audience. "We need a forensic analysis," Valerie said. "I am bringing in a specialist. Stay on the line." 10 minutes later, a new window popped up on my Zoom screen. It was a man named Arthur, a forensic accountant Valerie had worked with on previous divorce cases involving hidden assets. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Show me the documents," Arthur said. I shared my screen. I pulled up the loan agreement, the credit card applications, and the LLC incorporation papers. Arthur leaned in close to his camera. "Can you zoom in on the father's signature on the loan guarantee? The one on page 6? I magnified the image to 400%. "There," Arthur said, pointing a pen at his own screen. "Do you see the halo around the ink strokes? The slight pixelation at the edges of the T and the H?" "I see it," I said. "That is a lift and shift," Arthur explained. "Someone scanned a legitimate signature from another document, removed the background, and pasted it onto this PDF before flattening the file. It is a digital forgery. Your father never signed this. In fact, looking at the metadata of the PDF, the modification history shows it was edited in Adobe Acrobat Pro on a computer registered to Jenna's MacBook." My jaw tightened. "Jenna. She is in on it," Arthur said. "Or at least, her technology was used. If your father claims he didn't sign this, and we have this forensic proof, the loan is invalid against him. But since your signature is digital and authenticated by your email login, you are the only one legally on the hook right now, unless we prove you were defrauded." "We can prove it," I said. "I have the emails." "We need more," Valerie interrupted. "We need them to admit it. We need to tie the intent to the action. Riley, you need to be the wire." The next morning, the house was quiet. The tension from the previous day's slap was still thick in the air, but I forced myself to walk upstairs to the kitchen. My phone was in the front pocket of my hoodie, the voice memo app recording. Lydia was at the counter, sorting through mail. She didn't look up when I entered. She was playing the role of the aggrieved victim, waiting for an apology. "I am going to the bank today," I said, keeping my voice low and submissive, "to see if I can get a loan for Jenna's party deposit." Lydia stopped sorting. She turned around, a smug satisfaction spreading across her face. She thought she had broken me. She thought the slap had worked. "Well," she said, smoothing her hair, "I am glad you finally came to your senses. It is important for this family to look respectable." "I found some papers on my desk." I lied. "About the renovation loan. I didn't remember signing them. I was confused about the account number." Lydia's eyes flashed with annoyance. She walked over to me, invading my personal space again. But this time I didn't flinch. I needed her close to the microphone. "Oh, Riley," she sighed, her tone dripping with condescension. "You are overthinking it again. That is why you are just a worker, honey, and not a manager. The financial structure is complex for tax reasons. I handled it. I moved the money to an investment holding account to accrue interest before we pay the contractors. You don't understand these things." "So the money is for the house?" I asked clearly. "Not for anything else?" "Of course it is for the house," Lydia snapped. "Everything I do is for this house. You just sign where I tell you, and let me worry about the strategy. You are lucky I'm willing to manage your credit for you. Most stepmothers wouldn't care enough to build your score." "Okay," I said. "I just wanted to make sure. Thanks, Lydia." "Just transfer the deposit by noon," she said, turning back to her mail. "And don't make me ask again." I walked back downstairs. I stopped the recording. "The financial structure is complex for tax reasons. I moved the money." She had just admitted to commingling funds and controlling the flow of capital from a loan in my name. I sent the audio file to Valerie. 20 minutes later, Valerie called me. "We have enough," she said. "We have the forgery. We have the shell company records. We have the admission of control. And we have the video of the assault." "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do I pack my bags? Do I leave tonight?" I looked around the basement. I looked at the boxes of my things that I had never fully unpacked because I never felt like I truly lived here. I wanted to run. I wanted to get in my car and drive until I hit the West Coast. "No, no," Valerie said. Her voice was cold and hard, like iron. "If you run, you leave the mess behind. You leave your credit in ruins. You leave your father to be the next victim, and you let her win." "Then what?" "We don't run," Valerie said. "We invite them to a meeting." "A meeting?" "A financial intervention," Valerie corrected. "You are going to tell Lydia that you found a debt consolidator, a specialist who can help the family optimize their assets and get Jenna that mortgage she wants. You tell her this specialist needs a Zoom call with all decision makers present to finalize the strategy." "She will love that," I said, realizing the brilliance of it. "She loves anything that strokes her ego." "Exactly," Valerie said. "She will think she is walking into a negotiation to get more money, but she is walking into a deposition." "Who is the specialist?" I asked. "Arthur," Valerie said, "and me, and a detective from the fraud division who has been very interested in the file I sent him this morning. We are going to do this on your turf, Riley, on your screen, in the very medium she tried to use to humiliate you." I looked at the black screen of my laptop. "Set it up," I said. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the girl in the basement. I felt like the project manager, and I was about to execute the most important closing of my life. The art of the ambush lies not in the violence of the attack, but in the sweetness of the bait. I had spent my entire career managing complex project timelines, mitigating risks, and predicting failure points for software integrations worth millions of dollars. I knew how to herd cats. I knew how to manage expectations. But I had never applied those skills to my own family until now. The plan Valerie and I constructed was simple, yet it relied entirely on Lydia's two most dominant traits, her greed and her arrogance. I found her in the kitchen on Wednesday morning, 2 days after the slap. My cheek was still tender, the bruise blooming into a sickly shade of yellow and purple. But I had covered it carefully with concealer. I needed to look beaten, but not broken. I needed to look like I was trying to make amends. "Lydia," I said, keeping my voice soft, my posture slightly slumped. She turned from the sink, a wet sponge in her hand. She eyed me with that familiar mix of disdain and triumph. She thought she had won. She thought the slap had reset the hierarchy, putting me back in my place. "I have been thinking," I started, avoiding her eyes, "about what you said, about the financial complexity. I realized I have been rigid. I caused a scene, and I am sorry." Lydia set the sponge down. A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. "Well, it takes a big person to admit when they are wrong. Riley." "I want to fix it," I said. "I spoke to a colleague at work. He isn't from my department, so he doesn't know anything about what happened. He is a senior financial strategist. He helps high-net-worth families restructure their debt to leverage assets for better loans. I told him about the house and Jenna's situation." I saw the word high net worth hit her like a dopamine shot. "And?" she asked, leaning against the counter. "He said he could do a free consultation." I lied. "As a favor to me. He thinks he can consolidate the existing loans, lower the interest rates, and free up enough equity to get Jenna that mortgage in her own name immediately. He called it aggressive asset optimization." Lydia's eyes lit up. "And this is free?" "Yes," I said. "But he is very busy. He can only do it tomorrow night at 7, and he insists that all decision-makers be on the call. He needs you, Dad, and Jenna present to authorize the strategy." "That sounds reasonable," Lydia said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Your father and I will be there. I will make sure Jenna is free. It is about time you used your connections for something useful instead of just sitting in that basement." "I will set up the Zoom link," I said. "I will send the calendar invite." "Good," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "Make sure the connection is stable this time. We don't want to look like amateurs." I walked back to the basement, my heart rate steady. The hook was set. Now came the setup. I sat at my desk and opened the Zoom scheduler. This was not going to be a standard meeting. I adjusted the settings with the precision of a bomb technician. Enable waiting room. Mute participants. Upon entry. Disable private chat between participants. I sent the invite to Lydia, Jenna, and my father. Then, I sent a separate, encrypted invite to 3 other email addresses. The first was for Arthur, the forensic accountant. He would be playing the role of the financial strategist. His screen name would simply be A. Miller, consultant. The second was for Sarah, the lead counsel for Northline Dynamics. After the assault video, the company had gone into full protection mode. Sarah wasn't just there to support me. She was there to represent the company's interest in a case of employee endangerment. Her screen name would be Legal Note Taker. The third invite went to a man named Detective Henderson. Valerie had called in a favor. Henderson worked in the fraud division but had a crossover interest in domestic coercion cases. He wouldn't speak. He would just watch. His screen name was Admin Support. They would all enter the room with cameras off. To Lydia, they would look like boring, low-level assistants there to take minutes or handle technical issues. She wouldn't pay them a second glance. She never looked at the help. The next step was the presentation. I opened PowerPoint. I usually spent days refining the aesthetics of my slide decks, ensuring the branding was on point. This time, I stripped it down. Stark white background, black text, Arial font. Slide 1. Current financial status. This would show the fake numbers Lydia believed in, the struggling family narrative. Slide 2. Transaction velocity. This was where the trap would spring. It was a timeline. A simple, linear graphic showing the dates of the loans I had signed, overlaid with the dates of the transfers to Hartman Household Renovations, LLC. Slide 3. The beneficiary analysis. This slide contained copies of the cashed checks, the travel agency bookings, and the side-by-side comparison of my father's real signature versus the digital forgery on the loan documents. Slide 4. The operational environment. This slide was blank, except for an embedded video file. The file was named Zoom Recording Tuesday, MP4. I saved the presentation as Hartman Family Strategy Final. Valerie called me that evening to rehearse. "Remember the rules," she said, her voice tinny through my earbuds. "You are the facilitator. You are not the accuser. Not yet. Let Arthur drive the conversation. He's going to ask them to confirm their financial positions. He needs them to state on the record that they control the funds. Once they claim ownership of the money, they claim ownership of the crime." "I can do that," I said. "And Riley?" Valerie paused. "If she starts screaming, if she stands up, do not engage. You mute her. You are the host. You have the power." "I know." "Get some sleep," she said. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." But I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard footsteps upstairs. It was the heavy, confident tread of Lydia, followed by the lighter, quicker steps of Jenna. They were in the kitchen, directly above my head. I slipped out of bed and moved to the spot where the ventilation duct carried sound down from the upper level. It was an acoustic quirk of the house I had discovered years ago, one they knew nothing about. I pulled my phone out and hit record. "It is perfect," Lydia was saying. I could hear the clink of wine glasses. "If this consultant can consolidate the debt, we can drop the payments by $500 a month." "But what about Riley?" Jenna asked. "Is she going to keep paying?" "Of course she is," Lydia scoffed. "She is so desperate for approval she will sign whatever we put in front of her. But here's the best part. Once the deed is transferred to you and the new mortgage is approved, the house is legally ours, yours and mine. Thomas won't even be on it." "So what happens to her?" Jenna giggled. "Well," Lydia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr, "she can't live here for free forever. Once the house is in your name, we are going to draw up a lease. If she wants to stay in that basement, she can pay market rent. $1,200 sounds fair, don't you think?" "She will freak out," Jenna said. "Let her," Lydia replied. "Where is she going to go? She has no savings. We made sure of that." I stopped the recording. I stared at the waveform on my phone screen. We made sure of that. It wasn't just greed. It was malice. They hadn't just used my money. They had actively engineered my poverty to keep me trapped. They had drained my accounts specifically so I couldn't leave, ensuring a permanent supply of income for themselves. I wasn't a family member. I was livestock. I walked over to the mirror hanging on the back of the door. I turned on the small lamp. The light caught the yellowing bruise on my cheek. I touched it. It hurt, but the pain felt distant now, like a memory of a person who didn't exist anymore. I looked at my eyes. They were rimmed with dark circles, tired and bloodshot. But the fear was gone. The hesitation that had plagued me for 3 years, the fear of upsetting my dad, the fear of losing my family, had evaporated in the kitchen above me. I went back to my desk. I opened the presentation one last time. I added a 5th slide. I titled it, Future Revenue Projections, and I embedded the audio file I had just recorded. I closed the laptop. I swept the desk clean of everything except a notepad and a pen. I adjusted the webcam angle so it captured the entire room, including the door behind me. I wanted the audience to see everything. If Lydia decided to storm in again, there would be no bad angles this time. I was ready. The next morning, the house was buzzing with a strange energy. Lydia was in a good mood. She actually made coffee and left a pot for me. It was a peace offering, or perhaps a bribe, to ensure I played my part in the consultation. "Make sure you dress nicely, Riley," she called down the stairs at noon. "We want to make a good impression." "I will," I called back. I put on my best blazer. It was navy blue, sharp and professional. I did my hair. I put on my glasses. I looked like the manager I was supposed to be. At 6:45, I logged into Zoom. The waiting room began to fill up. A. Miller. Consultant joined first. Legal note-taker joined second. Admin support joined third. I admitted them all. Their cameras remained off. Their microphones were muted. "Can you hear me?" I asked into the void. Loud and clear, Arthur's voice came through. "We are ready." "Recording is active." Sarah from Legal typed in the chat. "Standing by," Detective Henderson messaged. At 6:58, a new notification popped up in the waiting room. The Hartman family requesting to join. I hovered my mouse over the admit button. My hand didn't shake. My heart wasn't racing. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. I clicked the button. The screen split. On the left was my face, calm and professional. On the right, sitting on the living room couch upstairs, were Lydia, Thomas, and Jenna. They were smiling. Lydia was wearing a pearl necklace. Jenna was holding a notepad. My father looked confused but hopeful. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for joining. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Miller, the financial strategist I told you about." "Hello," Arthur's voice boomed through the speakers, though his face remained hidden. "I have reviewed the preliminary file Riley sent over. I must say, it is quite intricate." Lydia beamed at the camera, unaware that she was smiling at an executioner. "We are very creative with our finances. Mr. Miller, we do what we have to do to survive." "Excellent," Arthur said. "Then let's look at the numbers, shall we?" I clicked share screen. The trap was open, and they had just walked right in. The screen was divided into 4 perfect squares. In the top left was my own reflection. I sat straight, my hands clasped on the desk, the bruise on my cheek concealed under a layer of foundation, but still tender to the touch. Behind me, the basement was clean, stark, and undeniably grim compared to the other feeds. In the top right, the consultant had finally turned on his camera. Arthur Miller sat in front of a blurred background, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my father's car. He looked every inch the high-powered financial strategist I had promised. His face was impassive, his eyes sharp and unreadable. In the bottom left sat the problem. My father and Lydia were squeezed onto the beige love seat in the living room upstairs. Lydia was wearing a silk blouse and her favorite pearl necklace, the one she bought the same month she told me we couldn't afford to fix the water heater. She had a glass of white wine just out of frame. I could see her hand reaching for it periodically. My father, Thomas, looked uncomfortable in a collared shirt that was too tight at the neck. He sat on the edge of the cushion, looking like a man waiting for a medical diagnosis he didn't want to hear. In the bottom right was Jenna. She wasn't in the living room. She had logged in from her studio apartment downtown, a place she claimed her boyfriend paid for, but which I suspected was subsidized by the cash withdrawals from my credit cards. The background was curated perfection. Exposed brick, a neon sign that said, "Good vibes only," and a monstera plant that looked expensive. She was checking her reflection in the camera, fixing her hair, looking bored before we had even begun. "Good evening," Arthur said. His voice was deep, commanding immediate authority. "I understand we are here to discuss an aggressive debt consolidation strategy for the Hartman estate. Is everyone present?" "Yes, we are all here," Lydia said, leaning forward. She put on her best telephone voice, the one that was 2 octaves higher than her real voice. "We appreciate you taking the time. Mr. Miller, Riley tells us you are a wizard with these things. God knows we need a miracle. The economy has been so hard on small business owners like myself." "I see," Arthur said, glancing down at a file on his desk. "And you are the primary financial decision-maker, Mrs. Hartman?" "I am," Lydia said firmly. She placed a hand on my father's knee, a gesture that looked possessive rather than affectionate. "Thomas isn't good with numbers, and Riley. Well, Riley tries, but she gets overwhelmed easily. I handle the strategy." "Excellent," Arthur said. "I like to start by establishing the current landscape. Riley mentioned that the household is operating at a deficit due to supporting adult dependents. Could you clarify that?" Lydia sighed, a long, tragic sound. "It is a difficult situation. Riley moved back in with us 3 years ago after she, struggled in the city. We didn't have the heart to turn her away. But feeding another adult, paying for her utilities, it adds up. We were forced to leverage some of her credit lines just to keep the house running. It wasn't ideal, but we had to do it to keep a roof over her head. I watched my father nod slowly. He believed this. He genuinely believed I was the drain on their resources. So the credit lines opened in Riley's name were used exclusively for household maintenance and survival expenses? Arthur asked. 100%, Lydia said, not blinking. Groceries, heating, taxes. We barely scraped by. And you? Jenna? Arthur directed his gaze to the bottom right square. I see you are looking to secure a mortgage. Is your income independent? Jenna smiled, bright and practiced. Oh, absolutely. I am an influencer. My income is variable, but significant. I just need the family assets to back me up for the down payment. Mom said we could use the equity from the house. Arthur nodded. Okay, let us look at the data. Riley, if you could share the transaction ledger? Of course, I said. I clicked share screen. I didn't open the budget spreadsheet Lydia had seen before. I opened the forensic timeline Valerie and I had built. The screen filled with a stark black and white grid. Column A, funds drawn from Riley Hartman's credit loans. Column B, transfer destination. Column C, ultimate beneficiary. What is this? Lydia asked, squinting at the screen. This isn't the budget. No, Arthur said, his voice dropping the pleasantries. This is a flow of funds analysis. Mrs. Hartman, you stated that the money was used for household survival. However, looking at line 4, on February 14th of this year, a withdrawal of $2,500 was made from Riley's card. That same day, a deposit of $2,500 was made into Hartman Household Renovations, LLC. That was for the plumbing, Lydia said quickly. I told you, I run the repairs through the business account for tax purposes. I understand, Arthur continued. But if you look at line 5, 3 days later, the LLC purchased a designer handbag from a boutique in Philadelphia for exactly $2,400. The silence on the call was sudden and absolute. Jenna stopped playing with her hair. She leaned closer to the camera. Mom? That is a mistake, Lydia snapped. It must be a coding error, or maybe it was a client gift. I have clients. Let us look at the renovation loan. Arthur pressed on, ignoring her. $25,000 secured against Riley's income. You claimed this was for structural repairs. Yet, the tracking shows $18,000 of that sum was transferred to a custodial account ending in 099. That account is joint owned by you and Jenna. My father turned his head slowly to look at Lydia. Lydia? You said that money went to the roofers. It did, Lydia said, her voice rising in pitch. It is just parked there, to earn interest. Thomas, don't look at me like that. You don't understand how banking works. I understand that the roofers threatened to sue us last month because the check bounced, Thomas said, his voice low. You told me the bank made a mistake, but the money was in Jenna's account? It is an internal arrangement, Jenna shouted from her square. God, why are you being so interrogaty? It is our money. We are a family. It doesn't matter whose account it is in. It matters, Arthur said. When the signatory on the loan claims she did not authorize the transfer, that is called misappropriation of funds. Lydia glared at the camera, her eyes locking onto mine in the top left corner. Riley, stop this. Stop this right now. You are embarrassing yourself. Tell him. Tell him you agreed to help your sister. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. She volunteered, Lydia shouted, slamming her hand on the armrest of the love seat. She gave us access. She wanted to help because she felt guilty for living here for free. Tell him, Riley, or so help me God. A notification popped up on my screen. A direct message from legal note-taker. Valerie. Now. Play it now. I think, I said, my voice cutting through Lydia's shouting. We should clarify the nature of my volunteering. I minimized the spreadsheet. I opened the video file. Lydia saw the thumbnail. It was the frozen image of her own face, distorted in rage, from 2 days ago. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I hit play. The audio was crisp and clear. Lydia's voice screamed from the speakers. "I don't care if it is the President of the United States. You transfer that money right now." On the screen, the living room went deadly quiet. My father watched the video, his eyes widening. Jenna covered her mouth. The video continued. We watched Lydia lunge. We watched the camera shake. We heard the slap. Crack. And then, the line that sealed her fate. "You are just a signature. You are just a cosigner. Don't you think for 1 second you are important enough to say no to me?" I let the video play until the end, where Lydia stormed out and I was left sitting on the floor, holding my face. Then I stopped sharing the screen. We were back to the 4 squares. Lydia was pale. Her hand was covering her necklace, clutching the pearls as if they were a lifeline. She wasn't looking at the camera anymore. She was looking at Thomas. Thomas was staring at the screen, his face draining of color until he looked like a ghost. He slowly turned his head to look at his wife. "You told me she threw a book," Thomas whispered. His voice was shaking. "You told me she attacked you. You said you were scared for your life." "She provoked me!" Lydia shrieked, pointing at the screen. "Look at her! Look at her smug face! She set me up! Thomas, she planned this! She made me angry on purpose!" "You hit her," Thomas said. He sounded like a child learning a difficult truth. "I watched you. You hit my daughter." "I did it for us," Lydia yelled. "For this house. For your retirement. Do you think your pension pays for anything? Do you? I am the one keeping us afloat. I am the one making the hard choices." "By stealing from her?" Thomas asked. "By making her pay for handbags? For Jenna's apartment?" "Mom!" Jenna interrupted, her voice shrill with panic. "Mom! Shut up! Is that video saved? Riley, did you save that? If the bank sees that—" "Oh my God, my credit, my mortgage. Mom, you said you handled it. If they see this, they will freeze everything." Jenna wasn't looking at me. She wasn't asking if my face hurt. She was calculating the damage to her own lifestyle. "This isn't just a video," Arthur said, his voice breaking through the chaos. "This is documentation of financial coercion enforced by physical assault. The timestamp is verified. The identity of the assailant is verified. And the admission of intent, 'You are just a cosigner,' is recorded." Lydia turned back to the camera, her eyes wild. "Who are you? You are not a debt consolidator. Who is this?" "He is a forensic accountant," a new voice said. The square labeled legal note-taker flickered. The black screen vanished. Valerie appeared. She was sitting in her office, framed by shelves of law books. She adjusted her glasses, her expression one of utter, terrifying calm. "Hello, Lydia," Valerie said. Lydia gasped. She recoiled as if she had been physically struck. "Valerie, you are banned from this house. And you are currently sitting in a digital meeting room that I convened," Valerie said. "I am Riley's attorney. I am also acting as special counsel for the fraud division of the bank regarding the irregularities in the Hartman accounts." "Attorney?" Lydia laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "You can't do anything. This is a family matter. Riley won't press charges. She knows better. She knows who takes care of her father." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Valerie said. "And I am not the only one here." "What?" Lydia looked around the room, confused. "I said I wasn't alone," Valerie repeated. "Riley, admit the admin." I moved my mouse to the participant list. I clicked on admin support. The final black square turned on. It wasn't a person in an office. It was a man in a uniform. The badge on his chest caught the light. Behind him was the unmistakable cinder block wall of a precinct interrogation room. "Mrs. Hartman," Detective Henderson said, his voice flat and official. "My name is Detective Henderson. I have been listening to this call for the last 20 minutes. I believe we have heard enough to establish probable cause." Lydia stopped breathing. Jenna cut her video feed instantly, her square turning black as she fled the digital crime scene. But Lydia couldn't run. She was sitting next to the husband she had lied to, staring into the eyes of the stepdaughter she had tormented, while the police watched from the cloud. "I think," Valerie said, closing her file, "we are done with the consultation. Now, we begin the negotiation for your surrender." The silence in the digital room was heavy, a physical weight that seemed to press against the screen. The four squares of the Zoom call, my basement, the living room upstairs, Valerie's office, and the interrogation room, were now joined by two more feeds activating. Sarah, the legal representative from Northline Dynamics, finally turned on her camera. She was sitting in a glass-walled conference room in Chicago, the city skyline visible behind her. She looked professional, unshakable, and completely devoid of sympathy for the woman sitting on my father's couch. "I have been here since the connection was established at 6:45, Sarah said. Her voice was crisp. "I am Sarah Jenkins, General Counsel for Northline Dynamics. I am here to represent the interests of our employee, Ms. Hartman, and to enforce our corporate policy regarding the safety of our remote workforce." Lydia stared at the new face on the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled onto a dock. "Company policy? This is my living room. You have no jurisdiction here. This is a private family matter." "It ceased to be a private matter the moment you assaulted an employee during a live corporate broadcast," Sarah replied smoothly. "And it ceased to be a family matter when you admitted, on record, to utilizing our employee's identity for fraudulent financial instruments." "I didn't admit that," Lydia screeched. She turned to Thomas, grabbing his arm. "Thomas, tell them to get off the screen. They are hacking us." "Mrs. Hartman, nobody is hacking you." Arthur, the forensic accountant, interjected. He leaned forward, his face filling his frame. "You voluntarily joined a meeting to discuss financial strategy. During this meeting, you explicitly confirmed that the funds from the renovation loan, funds legally attached to Riley Hartman, were diverted to a custodial account under your control. That is not hacking. That is a confession." I was confused," Lydia stammered, sweat beginning to bead on her forehead. "I misspoke. The numbers are complicated." "The numbers are actually quite simple," Arthur said, his tone dropping to a terrifying chill. "And because of the clarity of those numbers, I have already taken the liberty of contacting the fraud department at the issuance bank. As of 10 minutes ago, the accounts associated with Hartman Household Renovations LLC have been flagged for suspicious activity. They are temporarily frozen pending a full federal investigation." Lydia's face went gray. "Frozen? You can't do that. I have checks clearing tomorrow. I have expenses." "You mean you have payments due on a lifestyle you cannot afford," Arthur corrected. "We also flagged the custodial account ending in 099. No money moves in or out of that house starting now." Lydia stood up. For a second, I thought she was going to throw the laptop across the room. "This is illegal. You are recording me without my permission." "Actually," Detective Henderson spoke up from his square, his voice gravelly and bored, "Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state, but there are exceptions for the expectation of privacy when a crime is being committed. Furthermore, you consented to the recording when you entered the Zoom room. There was a disclaimer in the waiting room. You clicked agree." Lydia froze. She had clicked it without reading, just like she expected everyone else to do with her contracts. "Now," Henderson continued, shifting in his metal chair, "let's talk about the video. I saw you strike Ms. Hartman. I saw you pull her hair. I heard you threaten her housing situation if she didn't transfer money." "It was an accident," Lydia cried out, her voice shrill. "I tripped. I was trying to grab the mouse because the connection was bad, and I fell into her. She made it look like a slap." I watched her lie. It was fascinating, in a sickening way. She lied with the same conviction she used to tell me she loved me when she needed a check. "Mrs. Hartman," Henderson said, "we have high-definition video. We have the audio of the impact. We have the audio of you saying, "Don't you think you are important enough to say no to me?" That is not the dialogue of someone tripping. That is the dialogue of an aggressor. Lydia looked trapped. She looked at the camera, then at Thomas, then back at the camera. She provoked me. You don't know what it is like living with her. She is ungrateful. She disrespects me in my own home. Is that why you stole $45,000 from her? Valerie asked. The question cut through Lydia's hysteria like a razor. Valerie picked up a sheet of paper from her desk. She didn't look at the camera. She looked at the document, reading with the cadence of a judge delivering a sentence. March 3rd, Valerie read, $1,200 for emergency heating repair. The money went to the LLC. The heating company has no record of a service call. May 10th, she continued, $4,000 for roof structural support. The money was transferred to a personal credit card in your name, Lydia, which was used to pay for a weekend retreat at a spa in the Poconos. Stop it, Lydia whispered. July 15th, Valerie went on, her voice getting louder. $800 for pest control, transferred to cash, withdrawn at a casino in Atlantic City. I said stop it, Lydia screamed. You have spent years telling Riley she is a burden, Valerie said, looking up over her glasses. You told her she eats your food. You told her she takes up space, but the math says otherwise. Riley hasn't just paid for her room. Lydia, she has paid for your car. She has paid for your wardrobe. She has paid for your gambling. And she has paid for the very roof you are standing under right now. Valerie paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. This house doesn't support Riley, Valerie said. Riley supports this house. Lydia slumped back onto the sofa. The fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a sullen, toxic silence. She crossed her arms, looking away from the screen, refusing to engage with the reality that had just been read aloud. But there was one person who was still watching. My father. Thomas Hartman had not moved since the video of the slap ended. He sat on the edge of the cushion, his hands resting on his knees. He looked older than I had ever seen him. He looked like a man who had woken up in a burning building. Thomas, Detective Henderson said gently, Mr. Hartman, I need to ask you a question. My father looked up. His eyes were red. The signature on the loan document, Henderson said. The one for $25,000. Did you sign it? Thomas looked at the screen where Arthur had displayed the forensic evidence earlier. He looked at the jagged pixels of his own name. Lydia brought me papers, Thomas said softly. His voice was raspy. She brought them to the garage. I was working on the transmission. My hands were dirty. What did she tell you they were? Henderson asked. She said they were tax forms, Thomas whispered. She said Riley needed them signed to claim a deduction for her home office. She said if I didn't sign them, Riley would owe the IRS money. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. He hadn't signed them to hurt me. He had signed them because he thought he was protecting me. She had weaponized his love for me against me. Did you read them? Henderson asked. Thomas shook his head slowly. No, I never read them. She is the smart one. She handles the money. I just fix things. He turned to Lydia. She wouldn't look at him. You told me it was for Riley's taxes, Thomas said to her. But it was a loan? A loan against the house? Lydia didn't answer. She just stared at the rug. And the money, Thomas continued, his voice gaining a sudden, trembling strength. The money didn't go to the roof? It went to Jenna? Jenna needed a start, Lydia snapped, unable to help herself. She is young. She has potential. Riley has a career. Riley is fine. Why shouldn't we help Jenna get ahead? Because it wasn't our money to give, Thomas roared. It was the first time in 10 years I had heard my father raise his voice at her. It echoed through the laptop speakers, distorted but powerful. It was stealing, Lydia, Thomas shouted, standing up. You stole from my daughter, and then you hit her. You hit her right under my feet while I was drinking coffee. He looked at the screen, at my square. He looked at the bruise I had tried to hide. "Riley," he said, his voice breaking. "Riley, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know about the money." "I know, Dad," I said softly. "But I should have known," he said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I should have looked. I let it happen. I let her treat you like a dog in the yard." "Mr. Hartman," Valerie interrupted. Her voice was softer now, less prosecutorial. "We can fix the money, but we need to stop the bleeding immediately. Lydia has legal control over the joint accounts. She can drain them before the bank freeze is fully processed if she acts fast through other channels." "What do I do?" Thomas asked. He looked lost. "We need you to sign a temporary power of attorney," Valerie said. "Granting financial oversight of your assets to a third party, me. I will place everything into a trust. I will ensure the mortgage is paid, the lights stay on, and that not one single cent goes to Lydia or her LLC until the investigation is complete." Lydia jumped up. "You can't do that. That is my money, too. We are married." "It is a protective measure for assets under criminal investigation," Sarah from Northline added. "If you contest it, we will file for an immediate emergency injunction based on elder abuse and fraud." "Elder abuse?" Lydia gasped. "He is 58. He is a vulnerable adult whom you have manipulated into signing fraudulent documents," Sarah said coldly. "The label fits." Thomas looked at Lydia. He looked at the woman he had brought into our home, the woman who had slowly, methodically dismantled our lives for her own gain. "Send the papers," Thomas said. "Thomas," Lydia screamed, "don't you dare! If you sign that, I am leaving. I am taking everything." Thomas looked at her. For the first time, the fear was gone from his eyes. "You have already taken everything, Lydia," he said. "You took my money, you took my dignity, and you tried to take my daughter." He looked back at the screen, at Valerie. "Email them to me," Thomas said. "I will sign them right now. I will sign whatever you need. Just make sure Riley is safe. Make sure she gets her money back." "I will, Mr. Hartman," Valerie said. "And Lydia," Thomas said, turning his back on his wife to face the camera fully, "you aren't leaving. You are staying right here, because I think the officer has a few more questions for you." As if on cue, a doorbell rang in the background of the living room feed. Lydia's head snapped toward the front door. "That would be the patrol unit," Detective Henderson said from his square. "I asked them to stop by and collect a statement regarding the domestic disturbance, and to ensure the safety of the victim." Lydia looked at the screen, her face a mask of absolute terror. I watched her crumble. The arrogance, the entitlement, the sneer, it all evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a small, greedy woman who had finally been caught in the spotlight she so desperately craved. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, looking at me. "Riley, tell them, we are family." I reached for my mouse. I hovered over the end meeting button. "No, Lydia," I said, my voice calm, steady, and finally, free. "We are not family. You are just a line item I am deleting." I didn't wait for her response. I didn't wait to see the police walk into the living room. I didn't need to. I had the recording. I had the data. And for the first time in my life, I had the control. I clicked Leave Meeting. The screen went black, and I finally exhaled. The courtroom in the county municipal building smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that was miles away from the damp concrete of my father's basement, yet somehow felt cleaner. It had been 3 weeks since the Zoom call that dismantled the Hartman family facade. On the large monitor mounted on the wall to the left of the judge's bench, the video was paused. It was the frame right after the slap, where my face was turned away and Lydia's hand was still suspended in the air. The pixelation on the large screen made Lydia's expression look even more grotesque, a mask of pure, unadulterated entitlement. Lydia sat at the defendant's table. She was wearing a beige cardigan I had never seen before, something soft and grandmotherly, clearly chosen by her defense attorney to soften her image. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was staring at her hands, which were twisting a tissue into a tight white rope. Your Honor, Lydia's lawyer began, standing up. He was a tired-looking man who seemed to know he was fighting a losing battle. We are not disputing that an altercation occurred. However, we argue that the context has been manipulated. This was a family dispute that escalated. My client was under severe financial stress, trying to manage a household with multiple adult dependents. The alleged financial improprieties were simply creative accounting to keep the family afloat. There was no malicious intent. Judge Holloway, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie a human being could tell, looked over her reading glasses at the lawyer. Creative accounting, the judge repeated. Her voice was dry. Counselor, I have reviewed the evidence submitted by the plaintiff. I see a timeline of transfers from Ms. Hartman's personal accounts to a shell company registered to your client. I see a loan document with a digital signature that forensics have confirmed did not originate from the co-signer's device. And I see a video where your client explicitly threatens the plaintiff's housing status in exchange for money. That does not sound like creative accounting. That sounds like extortion. Valerie stood up next to me. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to be theatrical. She just laid a stack of papers on the table. We have also submitted the transcripts of the audio recordings taken by my client, Valerie said. Specifically the conversation dated 2 days prior to the incident, where the defendant discusses, and I quote, making sure she has no savings so that she cannot leave the residence. This establishes premeditation. This was a system of control designed to entrap my client financially. The judge looked at Lydia. Mrs. Hartman, do you have anything to say? Lydia looked up. Her eyes were wet, but I knew the tears were for herself, not for me. I just wanted us to be secure, she whispered. Riley didn't understand. I had to make the decisions. I did it for the family. You did it for yourself, the judge said sharply, and you did it at the expense of the person who was keeping a roof over your head. The gavel came down with a sound that felt more final than the slap ever had. I am granting the permanent protective order. Judge Holloway ruled. Mrs. Hartman, you are to have no contact with Riley Hartman. You are not to approach her residence, her place of employment, or any digital platform she utilizes. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. The judge turned a page in the file. Regarding the financial fraud allegations, I am forwarding the full evidentiary packet to the district attorney's office with a recommendation for criminal charges regarding the forgery and identity theft. This court also clears the way for Riley Hartman to be removed from all joint liabilities proven to be fraudulent. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. The fallout was swift and brutal. The bank did not wait for the criminal trial to act. Based on the forensic report Arthur had compiled, they froze the assets of Hartman Household Renovations, LLC, and flagged Lydia as a high-risk individual. The Platinum Rewards credit card, the one with the $15,000 limit, was closed, and the charges were reversed as fraud. Jenna found out the hard way. I heard later from a mutual acquaintance that Jenna had tried to pay for a table at a club in downtown Philadelphia the weekend after the hearing. When she handed over the card, the one she had borrowed from the mail, it was declined. She tried another card. Declined. She had called me 7 times that night. I didn't hear a single ring. I had blocked her number the moment I walked out of the courtroom. She was learning, finally, that the influencer lifestyle cost real money, and she no longer had a sponsor. My father was the one who surprised me the most. I went back to the house one last time to collect the rest of my things. I had hired movers so I wouldn't have to lift a finger, but I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything behind. The house was quiet. Lydia was staying at a motel, adhering to the protective order. I found Thomas in the garage. He was packing a box with his tools. The shelves that used to hold his car parts were bare. "Dad?" I asked, standing in the doorway. He turned around. He looked tired, but he also looked lighter, as if a heavy coat had been taken off his shoulders. "I am leaving, Riley," he said. He didn't look at the floor this time. He looked me in the eye. "I put the house on the market. The realtor is coming tomorrow." "Where will you go?" I asked. "I rented a room near the shop," he said. "It is small, But it is mine, and I filed the papers this morning. The divorce papers? He nodded. And the separation of assets. Valerie helped me. I am asking the court to liquidate the equity in the house. Once the mortgage is paid, whatever is left, half goes to you, to pay you back for the roof, for the car, for everything. Dad, you don't have to— I do, he interrupted. He walked over and put a grease-stained hand on my shoulder. I can't undo the last 3 years. I can't undo that I let her treat you like that because I was too weak to be alone. But I can make sure you get your money back. It is the only way I can sleep at night. I hugged him. It was a stiff, awkward hug. The kind you give when you are rebuilding a bridge that has been burned down. But it was real. He wasn't the hero of my story, but he was no longer the villain's accomplice. My career, ironically, had never been better. Marcus called me into a private Zoom meeting a week after the court date. I was nervous, expecting that despite their support, the company might want to distance themselves from the drama. Instead, Marcus offered me a contract. "We are creating a new role," he said, smiling on the screen. "Director of Remote Implementation. You handled a crisis in real time with more composure than most of my executives. We want you to lead the team, and part of the package is a relocation stipend. You can work from anywhere you want. Riley, as long as you have good Wi-Fi." I took the job, and I took the stipend. I didn't move to Paris or New York. I stayed in Riverton, but I moved to the other side of town, into a sleek, modern apartment complex near the river. It was small, just a 1-bedroom, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows and, most importantly, walls that I didn't share with anyone who hated me. The lease was in my name. The electric bill was in my name. The internet was in my name. There were no co-signers, no family discounts, just me, paying for my own life, on my own terms. The final ghost of the past arrived on a Tuesday evening, just as I was setting up my new home office. It was an email from Lydia. It had bypassed my spam filter because she used a new address. Subject: Thinking of you. Riley. I know the lawyer said I shouldn't write, but I had to try. I am staying at my sister's. It is awful here. I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what happened in court. I know you were angry, but please remember, everything I did to keep the family from being poor. I didn't want us to struggle. I only did it because I love you all so much, and I wanted us to have nice things. Please, can we talk? I need help with the legal fees. I stared at the screen. I forgive you. The audacity was breathtaking. She was still trying to spin the narrative, still trying to cast herself as the martyr and me as the confused child. She wanted money for her legal fees. She wanted to pull me back into the cycle. I moved my mouse to the trash icon. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. She was just a stranger who had once lived in my house. I clicked delete, then I clicked block sender. I turned my chair to face the window. The sun was setting over the river, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. The apartment was silent. No footsteps upstairs, no shouting, no demands. My computer chimed. It was time for the weekly team check-in. I adjusted my webcam. I checked my lighting. Behind me, there were no boxes of junk. There was just a clean white wall, a single abstract painting I had bought with my own money, and a bookshelf filled with books I actually read. I clicked join meeting. The screen filled with faces, my team, my colleagues. "Hey, Riley," one of the junior developers said. "Love the new background. Is that the new place?" "It is," I said, smiling, and this time, the smile reached my eyes. "It is all mine." "Looks great," Marcus said from his square. "Ready to get started?" "I am ready," I said. I looked into the camera lens. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of who might be watching. I wasn't hiding. I was just Riley Hartman, senior director, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The recording light blinked on, a steady, reassuring red dot. I took a deep breath, opened my notes, and began to speak, my voice clear and strong, echoing in a room that finally, truly, belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below, sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled Lydia. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people hear this story. Your support means the world to me.